Hi everybody and welcome back to Plastic Models by Regular Dude. So today I want to talk a little bit about my next project. If you've been following along on my channel, you'll know that I just finished the construction portion of the Lee M3 Lee Mid by Tacom. It's all put together and ready to go. I'm just waiting on a few extra parts for the specific version I'm going to build so I can get into paint and priming, painting, weathering, and all that. So while I'm waiting for that, it's going to take about a week or a little more for those parts to come in. So I want to have something to work on in the meantime. So some months back, a friend of mine back east, Ben Brandis, sent me a couple of kits. One of them being the Monogram version of the Lee Tank M3. Now it's the old Monogram kit, and I'll talk about a little bit about it. We'll look at it here in a minute. And I have a specific idea for it. What I want to do with the kit is back in the 70s, Shepard Paine did a diorama using this kit, and I kind of want to replicate that diorama. So this is the cover of the diorama tip sheet that came with the kit back in the 70s. So that's what I want to do. There's some modifications that have to be made, and I'll talk about that once I dive into the kit, but it's something I've wanted to do. And when when Ben sent this kit, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity. I haven't built a diorama ever. So I want to duplicate this one that Shepard Paine did back in the 70s. I really liked his work, and I really want to try and duplicate it as closely as possible, which includes using all of his methods for some scratch building and modification to the tank, and the way he painted the tank and weathered it. So I thought it'd be a fun project, and after I got my last video, part 2 of the Tacom M3, once I got that posted, another friend of mine, Peter Persson from Sweden, asked if I was planning on doing a comparison build. Well, I hadn't really thought about it, but that's actually a genius idea to kind of see how this old kit builds up in comparison to this practically brand new molding by Tacom. So that's the plan. So I'm going to build this tank with the intention of eventually getting on a diorama, but for a short term it'll be kind of a comparison build with the Tacom kit. Now, knowing that the M3 Lee tank was molded years ago, I don't know, I haven't looked on ScaleMates to see when the first molding of it was, the first release, but it's pretty old, and I built one in the 70s, like 77 maybe, so it's been around a while. So let's go ahead and turn the camera around, and we'll take a look at the box and the contents. All right, here's the box. This particular boxing is copyright 1983, which, according to ScaleMates, was the last time this kit was actually released. It was initially released in 1973, so it's a pretty old kit. So, keep that in mind whenever I compare this one to the Tacom kit. So let's go ahead and take a look in the box. Ben had started it looked like he got the tracks connected together. Now, one thing that's kind of funny, and I think it was on some other brands of kits as well, but the Monogram kits were famous for this, is the tracks were designed incorrectly. So you got the trackpad here with an end connector right on the end, when the end connector should be connecting the two track pads together. So that's kind of funny. And as a kid, I never even noticed it, because I built the Lee and the Sherman, which has the same tracks, and I never even noticed it. But that ain't gonna hurt anything. So as far as the parts go, let's take a look at the instructions and stuff first. So this is the instructions, and these are old school. Now these are a little bit different than I think the yeah, so this is copyright 1973 and 83. I think the earlier versions of the instructions, if I remember correctly, not only did it have these illustrations, but it also had verbiage on here that said, you know, glue part 22 to 21 with 23 in between, but don't cement it, you know, stuff like that. And as you can see with the color call outs, it basically just has the color. You know, it doesn't give you, you know, any brands or anything like that. And so quite a bit different than the modern stuff. And this has, you know, multiple languages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 additional languages. You know, with English being the primary language here. And it's funny because that's probably why they changed the instructions not to have any verbiage in each part, because, you know, they'd have to print all these different languages. So they just went with the little illustrations that are so common nowadays. But not a whole lot to the instructions. Pretty clear cut. Some really good illustrations, actually. But yeah, these are it. And you know, it's I mean, we're up to 16 here, but number 16 you're only gluing one part on. So, you know. Then we have it's up to 24. Yeah, it looks like 24 steps. The last being putting the turret in place and gluing these things on there, whatever they are. But you know, on the back gives you different marking options. You have American, you have Russian, and you have British, which is funny because the British, they actually made a Grant version, which is exactly the same with the exception of a different turret. So that's the instructions. So here are the parts, and this is kind of interesting. I didn't notice it at first, but what you have here is the running gear and suspension components, and the hull, the lower hull part. Now, what's interesting is these parts are identical to the M4 Shermans they did. They did two different ones. There was one that was called the Hedgehog that was supposed to be an M4A3, but it had the incorrect suspension on it instead of the later type with the trailing idler wheel, or return roller I should say, and the skid on top. But this and the lower hull are the same in the M4A3, the Lee, the Grant, and the M4A1 Screaming Mimi, which I built a few years back. So these parts are identical. Then this part here is more of the parts that are specific to the Lee itself. So before we look at those, we'll look at the decals here. And these things are quite old, obviously, since these were printed 12 of 82. And I can see just in looking at them that there's a lot of crackling going on. So I'm not going to be using these decals. Number one, I'd like to kind of, you know, preserve them because, I mean, that's kind of cool. 1982. And, you know, they'll probably fall apart in the water because they really are. There's a lot of cracking going on it. Don't know if you can see it, but the registry on them, you know, this is 70s technology. So like that flag right there, it's kind of crooked and stuff. But, you know, that's what we had back then. And that didn't detract from the build at all. A lot of fun. So let's take a look at the contents of the bag and the sprue in the hull. First up, we got the lower hull, and there's some molding marks in here. 7536 0600 OD. Obviously, that is for the U.S. versions of the vehicle. And then 7535 0600 beige would be for the Grant, because that came in kind of a tan color. It's got all the rivet detail on it, and it's got some burn marks there. Ben, you could comment and tell me what those are all about. That's kind of weird. But, you know, 70s technology right there. Copyright, Monogram models. All rights reserved, made in the USA. Doors molded on the back. A lot of stuff that would be separate details in newer kits were molded right on. Then we have the sprue with the suspension components, the running gear. And, you know, this is old technology, so there is some flash, and some of the parts, you know, may not be quite lined up like they should, so it'll take a little cleanup. But again, that's par for the technology of the time. Now the wheels, there's a pretty good seam line on the wheels there, but they seem to be lined up correctly, so it won't take a whole lot just to buzz that that seam line off of there. It won't be too big of a deal. I remember these tarps. It's supposed to be a tarp. It's molded out of plastic, and you know, it looks like a tarp. But you know, it does have some decent detail. Again, considering the time frame in which this was built, you know, the bolt detail on these flanges that go on the 3-piece transmission cover, I mean, they look pretty good. The detail, there's some cast texture going on in there on the arms, suspension arms here, and then on this main part here. So not bad. You know, the handle of the shovel's filled in. Nice antenna, which actually isn't that bad because antennas, I guess, were pretty thick on these things back then. But not bad. All right, next up we have the turret. The turret parts. This base plate seems to be warped a little bit, but that's the way it was on that Screaming Mimi I built. So no big deal, just be a matter of clamping it together. But and then there's a couple of figures, the seated figure here, and then this standing figure here, like the commander or whatever. Turret details. Some extra helmets for the other crew members, because they could fit quite a few guys in these things. I think it was seven guys could fit in one of those things. Now some of the parts have fallen off. We got the headlight assembly here with the guard mounted on. This is the periscope, or the gun sight for the 75mm main gun. This part goes on the turret. It creates this bulged portion here, which is kind of crafty like. It's a pretty cool molding method. So I'll probably have to see if that should be filled in or not with putty. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be one piece or what. I don't know if that was cast all together, but I'll have to check that out. Then there's two of these, which is kind of weird. This is the swivelly part for the gun. The gun mounts in here. Oh, never mind. I see what we got going on here. It's the two halves. Duh. See a little bit of flash in there. And then the back fenders. So there's those. And then we have the upper hull, which if you've been following my tack-on build, all this stuff is separate pieces. On the Monogram kit, it is one huge piece, so you don't have to worry about any misalignment going on. It's all one big casting. The only part that you have to cement on is the back plates here. that go around the upper superstructure. And those are on this sprue here. So you got the 2-part main gun here, so that'll take a little cleanup. But these are the parts that go on the back here. You got your tow rope, the mantlet cover, and then, yeah, this part goes in the back there. So, and then this is the 37mm gun. That'll take a bit of cleanup. It's just interesting to see how this was molded in comparison to the modern stuff. I mean, some things are the same, like these parts here for the toe clevises, identical. This has got the screw detail and rivet detail. Then you have the toolbox lids. The toolboxes are just part of the hull, so you just glue the lids on. And that's all one big part. So whenever I glue this onto the lower hull, I'll have to do some filling and sanding there to get that lined up right. For most modern kits, this part is a separate part. So yeah, that's it. That is the M3 kit. Well, that's pretty substantial, and it's nice because this isn't warped at all. Things like these fuel tank filler cap covers, armored covers, those are separate pieces. So yeah, it looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to there's a good website, and I'll try and remember to put a link in the bottom. There's a good website online that shows the Shepard Paine diorama tip sheets. It's all on one page, and you just click on the one you want and it opens it up, and it's not formatted exactly the same as the original tip sheets were, but it has all the information there and all of the illustrations and photos, so you can see exactly what was going on. And that's what I'm going to use to build this kit, because one of the things that I have to do is I will have to cut these doors out and carefully, and build a new framework on the inside where this was cut out to close up the space a little bit and pose one of these doors open. So that's one of the scratch modifications I'm going to have to do. So it'll just be kind of fun to build this thing up and to do it the way Shepard Paine and many other great modelers of that time period did things, as far as weathering and painting and all that, because the methods have changed quite a bit in comparison to what we do nowadays. So anyway, that's kind of the intro to this. So next time we'll actually start with the construction on this thing. I'm not sure if I'm going to do like a step-by-step or video as I build kind of thing. It'll just kind of depend. If I do, I'm going to make it short and sweet, make sure all my parts are cut off and cleaned up and ready to go, so as not to take up a whole lot of video time, because that can get monotonous. So anyway, that's it for now on the Monogram M3 Lee. So stay tuned for more videos coming up with this project, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about comparing it to the TACCOM kit. Once I get it done, then I'll put them side by side and kind of do a little visual comparison. So anyway, thanks for joining me here on Plastic Models by a Regular Dude, and I will see you all next time.